Hello everyone, and welcome to another Mission Makers vlog. Today we're going to be talking about setting the tone. Now, setting the tone is a very important part of establishing how you want the players to act during your mission. Do you want them to be funny, crack jokes, play it serious, play it straight? Do you want them to focus on role-playing, or do you want them to think about gameplay? It's important to invoke the tone that you're expecting from them for that mission, so that way they know how they're supposed to act. The difference being that most players can play just the game straight through as strategically and as well as possible, but it's important that all the players in the Mission Maker are on the same page of how serious a mission is supposed to be. This not only prevents frustration from players who might be trying too hard on a mission that doesn't really have much consequence around it, or just doing it for fun, but also allows players to really get immersed if everyone is on the same page of what they're supposed to be doing. So even before you start a mission, all the subliminal effects of how people are going to act during your mission start as soon as they enter the game. How they're acting while they're waiting for everyone else to log on, whether or not they're messing around, doing stupid stuff that they shouldn't. If it's going to be a serious mission, you have to enforce the rules, get them in shape, get them in the mindset that, that the mission is not meant to be toyed with, that you want them to take it seriously. If you don't enforce the general rules that you would expect from Mission Maker, i.e. don't mess around with vehicles before the mission starts, shooting at each other or near each other, don't do foolish, careless mistakes and all that, you want to enforce those rules if you want them to take the mission seriously. Now, all these different tones aren't exactly polar opposites of each other. You can mix seriousness with roleplay, with playfulness and all that, but in terms of what invokes what tone, we're going to be talking about how to invoke those. Now, after everyone's in the game and ready for their briefing, the way you give the briefing is also very important to the tone that you set. You don't want to give the players of a conflicting message by enforcing rules and then suddenly giving a briefing that you half-assed and didn't really care about. Making a clear, concise briefing that sounds serious, immersive, and realistic allows the players to get into the game and really understand the situation in terms of its tone. If you want the players to play in a serious tone, then you give a very clear, concise briefing with specific intelligence related to the objectives and also explaining to them what's at stake in this virtual world that you've set up. Well, you don't want to give players conflicting messages by enforcing rules while they wait at base and then giving a briefing that's half-assed, relaxed, doesn't really have the clear, concise info that you would expect from a realistic, immersive briefing. If you want people to take your mission seriously, you need to act like it. Act serious yourself. You'll invoke that tone, people will pick up on that subliminally, and more or less act in the way that you expect them, and they expect you to act, honestly. Of course, this also comes down to the mission itself. If they're playing something that's more or less redundant, doesn't really have much interesting about it or intriguing, people don't pay attention as well to the briefing, they lose interest, they start to not care as much. And when people stop caring about how serious the mission is, that's where you failed. During the mission, this can happen in multiple ways. For one, people can be rolling their eyes at, say, an unfair death, something that was not preventable, as is most things in war. But for gameplay reasons, you want to make sure you're not killing players unreasonably and unnecessarily without any sort of reparations, as if they were being killed unnecessarily to give those few who survive a more intense experience, using the players who died as something, say, like a reinforcement unit, send them in with AI or something to try and rescue those few who survived. Something like that makes the death not feel pointless. But I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here about how to handle players who've died and so on. Talking about how the more players care about a mission, the more likely they are to take it seriously. In order to maintain that serious nature, which is the hardest tone to keep, considering that everyone knows that it's a video game, it is the hardest tone to maintain. And some units spend a lot of time into their players, making sure that everyone maintains a serious tone. But for the everyday mission maker, it's a bit more difficult. So besides unnecessary deaths, to maintain the serious tone, you also want to make sure that Nothing game-breaking happens. Accidentally lightning striking something because you clicked a lightning bolt instead of remote control. Things like that just break people out of it, make them not care. Time and time again, punishing players without reason is also something you don't want to do. You don't want to make their life more difficult for no other reason other than to make it more difficult. If you're trying to build a scenario or build a scene, you want everything to have a purpose in setting up that scene. Let's say, for example, an enemy shoots out the tires of a Humvee. If the only reason the enemy shot the tires out of the Humvee was to make it more inconvenient for the players, then that sort of frustration can build on itself if things like that happen over and over again. People start to care less, they lose interest, they don't really want to play it anymore because they're not having fun because it's just a series of inconveniences. You start to lose your tone, and when you start to lose player interest, you lose the seriousness of the tone. So that was a lot in one. We're going to talk shortly about some other tones, because seriousness is definitely the hardest to maintain, which is why I've said the most about that, but we'll just touch up on the other ones for a bit. So besides straight seriousness, there's tones that invoke a sense of playfulness. There are two main ones that I particularly notice. That includes, of course, role-playing, which is similar to serious tone as in everyone's playing along on the same page, but not as serious as the serious tone. People don't usually follow procedure as much, they get a bit lax, they don't entirely strategize things as well, but they're all into pretending to be in the world, playing along with whatever's going on, chit-chatting back and forth about things in the game world. But you have to be careful because you don't want to give players the misconception that you don't want them to take it seriously. Because in a way, you want them to take it seriously, or you at least want everyone to be on the same page of how they're supposed to act. They don't necessarily need to strategize as much, and you can obviously invoke that in something like your briefing. And your briefing really is the strongest first impression on how the mission is going to play out, which is why I keep going back to it in terms of setting the tone. If your briefing is relaxed and doesn't necessarily provide a sense of urgency or seriousness, then they're likely to act less serious and less urgent about the situation. Now, typically, I would reserve this type of tone for missions that don't involve a whole lot of combat, but involve a lot of interaction. Again, you don't want to give the conflicting message of telling them not to take it seriously in a strategic sense and to do a lot of roleplay, and then give them almost nothing but combat. That removes the purpose of what you're supposed to be doing in terms of that tone. Now, the last type of tone we're going to talk about shortly is the non-serious tone. The one that you really don't want anyone to have to worry about anything. Just let them do whatever they want and really not have to worry about any sort of rules or what they have to do or what they should do. And of course, this type of tone works best for things that are just messing around, spawning random units in Zeus, doing silly stuff like attaching tank cannons to go-karts and launching yourself around Altus. These types of things don't really need, or probably would not at all, ever be taken in a serious tone, simply for the matter of what they actually are, the nature of their ridiculousness. I'd be very impressed for anyone who could give a serious briefing about how they were supposed to fly their Chinook with M1 Abrams attached to the sides and do an airstrike on a town filled with missile-launching go-karts over the ocean. But I digress. The worst thing you can do in terms of setting the tone is give conflicting messages, which is why it's really important that when people get in the mission, they know what they are going to expect in terms of what you expect of them. When they're playing in a serious tone, strategically, they're not going to stop and talk to anyone because that's not their objective. And if it is their objective, they're going to be thinking gameplay-wise. How can we get from point A to point B to our objective best and fast as we can? If you want them to do more interactions, you have to invoke that tone so that way they know what they're supposed to do in terms of how long they're supposed to have interactions. Make sure that they're safe to have those interactions and not be punished for it. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to convey to them what they're allowed to do so that way they don't get punished for, say, staying around in a town too long, talking to some guys. And of course, these examples are very situational. You can have anything happen in any of these missions, but you have to be conscious of what the players are thinking, what they think they're doing right, not necessarily their mistakes, because their mistakes might be what they think you expect from them, and that's why setting the tone is very important from the first minute that they enter the game. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to leave any comments if you have any questions or suggestions of topics even. And feel free to argue against what I say. I mean, I'm just one guy. I can't have all the answers, right? Right? I hope I don't. That'd be terrifying. I don't want to have all the answers. Because you know what happens when you have all the answers. Everyone asks you questions. I hope I could at least get your cerebral cortex pumping and get you thinking about a little bit of psychology in the mission-making world. And see you guys next time. Happy 10th episode! Seriously, is 10 episodes really? It's not, I don't... Maybe. I don't know. Is 10 really that milestone? Maybe 20? Maybe 20 could be a milestone. I mean, 10's the double digits, right? But it's like, 10 isn't really that interesting. I mean, like, it's like saying 1 month anniversary. It's like, really? 1 month? Nah, it's like, I don't know. It's 10. Maybe like 50. Like, how many is in a year? That's probably, how many weeks are in a year? That's probably closer to what it is, right? Like, it's